So I'm going to give you a quick solution overview, a quick tour of BrightWork 365, and then we're going to get into these additional three elements here. I won't talk too much about them on this slide, but just brief. I'll come back to this slide, however. But briefly, we'll talk about reusable process, reusable content. So we got process, sort of a framework for the project management, templates, a structure. Then we have the actual ways for you to reuse content. So tasks and risks and issues, how those can be reused. So those will help you get going quickly. And global settings. So these are settings that you kind of set once and forget, or set globally, and then individual project managers can override those at the project level. We'll talk about that, and then we'll get into some Q&A at the very end. So on to the live demo. Let me just share my web internet explorer here, my internet browser here. Okay, so the first thing I want to point out before we get into the product itself is that we do have a knowledge base. This is open to everybody. You don't have to be a customer. So just a little advertisement for the knowledge base. It for the most part follows the structure of the product itself. So you'll see in a moment that in the product we have a requests area, we have projects, we have a request module, then we have the actual project management module itself, and then a way for you to organize all of those underneath portfolios. And then of course the typical knowledge base additions of getting started. Customer success talks a lot about the partners that you'll be working with, but there's useful information uh, for you individually as well, and some other elements, and including a release notes, which talks about the history of the product over time, and whenever we have new releases, we will update that. So moving on from the knowledge base, let's just give that. Let's look at what the agenda says. It says we're going to do a solution overview, a quick tour of BrightWork 365. So the home screen here is what we're looking at. It kind of gives you, it flows up all of these statistics and metrics from whatever's going on within the project itself. So you can see all of the requests that I submitted, the open request, how many have been approved. I'll show you what requests look like in a moment. We have the projects. How many projects am I personally managing? In this case, there's two down here, my projects. How many projects I'm assigned work on is one. I'm lucky, but I'm sure if this were not a demo, it would be a much higher number. And a lot of other information about projects floated up here, and then portfolios. We have one portfolio in this case and four programs that fall underneath the portfolio. You are welcome to create as many portfolios or programs that you wish. This would just be like a common, maybe starter setup, one portfolio, four programs. We'll just talk a little bit about, I'm going to go down the line here on the left. I have no work that's assigned to me at the moment, again, because it's a demo site. But if I go to all work, we should see some other work. There you go. Plenty of other people are assigned work. Again, this is bringing this information up from throughout the from throughout the solution. We could always click in and get drilled down, but this does it does bring up the information that we think is most important to see at a glance. We have dashboards. Again, we have webinars that kind of go into these things in a lot more detail, but briefly, we have Power Apps charts, as you can see here. Each one of these links going down the line will open up a series of multiple charts, as you can see. Lots of things here. I won't take you through all of these, but I do want to point out that in addition to these Power Apps charts, we do include Power BI charts as well. Now, in order to use we include them with all of our licenses, but to make use of these Power BI reports or dashboards, you would need to have the relevant Microsoft license. So in addition to your Power Platform license, your Microsoft 365 components, Microsoft does give you the opportunity to purchase Power BI licensing as well. And if you have that, you can make use of these additional Power BI dashboards that we include. But again, regardless whether you pay Microsoft for the Power BI accessibility or not, we do include it as part of the product. And again, all of these other ones here, 1 through 7 in this case, they're all, you don't need any special Power BI licensing for these charts. Okay, requests. I'm going to come back to requests in a moment when we get into other parts of the agenda, but this is what I was referring to as the request module or link on the main nav over here. So quite often the whole process of managing projects will begin with somebody submitting a request for a new project. And there's a whole business process flow behind that. There are approvals that are included for that whole request process. We'll come back to this in a moment. We have the projects module over here. And again, we'll dig into a specific project and look at the structure in a moment, but this would just be a report or dashboard of all the projects that are in play. And again, we surface the some information right there at the top without having to click in, but you can click in. Many different templates available as well, so that they're not all going to look exactly the same if you don't want them to. In the projects, they'll most likely, unfortunately, but is always the case, there will be issues that present themselves in the projects. There's going to be, hopefully, you'll be doing some risk management as well. And for those, we have other reports on the side over here. So we have open issues, for example, again, surfacing all of those issues that are throughout the projects. You can slice and dice them in different ways. Show me the closed ones, only the open ones, etc. And risks is going to be a similar situation. So these are all the open risks, for example, that somebody is hopefully assigned to monitoring them. You can see some of them do have risk monitors in the real world. They all should. And again, you can drill down to different filtering for those risks. And finally, moving on to the portfolio link over here. So you saw in the beginning on the home page, we have one portfolio in this case, but you could have multiple. This would be like the top level of a hierarchy. So the granddaddy or grandmother of everything that's going on. So if I click into this portfolio called Contoso, you can see you can add information and have status reports about the portfolio as a whole, if you wish. It could have its own action items and issues and risks, but they also have child programs. So in this case, we have 4 child programs. Let's click into one for now. Let's click into the marketing program. That's going to take us down to this module here. So this is kind of like the middleman, right? So we have the portfolio at the top and we have a program in the middle. It's really just like a way that you wish to organize your portfolio of projects. And within each program, again, you can have separate issue management, risk management, cost, etc. And you'll also see a list of all the child projects. So the child projects would be the lowest level of the whole hierarchy, right? So you have a program, that program has these child projects in it. And we'll click into those in just a bit. In addition to this projects area, which is where your typical end user is going to be spending all of their time, your typical team member or sponsor will most likely be in this projects area. We do have other areas for different roles, for more administrative type roles, or even a project manager who has the right permissions to get into. We have a template area. Again, this is not for your typical end user to go into. I'll come back to this in a minute, kind of explain what these links are all about. And then we have the appropriately named admin area. Again, not for your typical end user, but for somebody who has a role which would have to who would have to change information or update information or configure things in this admin area. And I am going to come back to that as well. Let's get back to the project area and go back to our agenda for a moment. So what I'm going to start talking about now is the whole reusable process piece. So why do we include reusable process? Well, like it says there, it's to let you start managing projects quickly, but in a standardized way. So you don't necessarily want everybody to have a different process that they're going through in order to get through, for example, a request from its initial submission to its final approval. You probably want to have some sort of a standard uh, method of managing your requests and managing your projects. So let's talk about what I mean by reusable process. Get back in here. So part of it is going to be what kind of a project do you eventually want to create from the request? And that's going to be determined from when you first click on new. So let me click on new, and I'm just going to give this a demo request. Now, a title is going to be the same for everything, but this is where you're going to choose what kind of reusable process are you interested in. So I'm going to hit my enter key. And you can see here we have 5 different request templates. There's more than 5 here, but out of the box, there are 5 different request templates for you to choose from. Starting on sort of the left side of the spectrum, let's say the lightest side, I can say I want this request to be for a light type of a project. So I would choose the light one. If I want something that's a little bit more slightly more process heavy, I can choose our project standard type of a template. And I'll show you what behind the scenes makes these operate differently with different process. Taking it another notch higher, we can have our project structured template to choose from, which I'll show you, which would be it has risk management in it, for example. It has action items. It has issue management, where some of the lighter ones would not have those. A fourth template that we include, we're going to ignore some of the other custom ones that are here. But by the way, you can create derivatives of our 5 templates so that you could also have more than 5 templates for your users. But the next one that would be out of the box is called new product idea, which is like it sounds. You might have an idea for somebody might have an idea for a new product, and they would submit a request for that kind of a project. And if you're just making an update to a product, so maybe a new version for a product that already exists that's out there. And remember, or not remember, but keep in mind, we're not necessarily talking about a literal product or literal product or product idea. It might be some new technology from a vendor that you want to implement in your own organization. So maybe there's going to be updates that your internal folks are making to a third-party product that you're using internally, for example. Now, if I choose one of these, let's go with project structured, you'll see that it's now figuring out, okay, this person is submitting a request for one of our more formal or mature type of templates, a project structured template, um, in contrast to one of the lighter ones. So there's quite a bit of fields that the person would be filling out when they request a new project that's built from the project structured template. If this was a lighter one, you would see fewer fields here. So information for you to include there. There's some project details, some of which are automatically included because you chose that particular template, and some of which are changeable by the person who's submitting the request for this type of a project. What I would like to talk about now is how did this reusable process, so for example, you see across the top here, this, when somebody's submitting a request for a project structured type of a project, they're going to have a particular process across the top. And it's an approval process. So if I want a project structured project eventually after this request gets approved, I'm going to have to go through this approval process. It's going to have to go from draft to accepted to reviewed and then finally approved. And when it gets to the approved stage, if the template was configured as such, a project would finally get created from this request. So what I'd like to do is go behind the scenes and just show you how is it that this particular business process flow is being used here and is reusable, and how this particular form got put in here automatically. So I am going to go into our templates area now. And I'm going to click on request templates because at the moment we're talking about reusable request templates, getting started with request process very quickly. If I go into that project structured request template, but you can see we have at least the other 4 that I mentioned, you'll see information that can be manipulated by somebody who has the appropriate permissions. Now, out of the box, we set up as much of this as we can. Of course, we're not going to be able to include what's called an approvals coordinator out of the box because that's going to be based on your own user directory in Azure or Entra. So you can choose your own people who should be an approvals coordinator, for example. But we do include this other information. So the form template is what, when you saw that there were different fields that the person needed to fill out as part of the request, that was dictated by what was chosen in this form template field. And that could be changed by you. And you can even do customization so that that form that showed up maybe has additional fields, or maybe you're hiding some fields from it. The business process flow, let me just duplicate this just to remind you what that's about. I'm going to go back into the project area. I'm going to click into requests here, and let's go into this one here. So when I'm talking, I'm back at the request template place over here. When we're choosing which business process flow should be reused every time somebody wants a project structured project, for example, what I'm referring to, I know this is a new product idea, but it's very similar. We're referring to the whole approval process that goes across the top. So that's going to automatically be there for you when you choose that request template. If you want to change it to something else, you can just simply click the X over here and choose one of the other business process flows that are available. And it can be customized as well. And the form template, like I mentioned, would be all of these fields that show up here. The project template, that's just saying that when somebody chooses a request for a project structured project, this is the template that project will eventually be created from. So of course it makes sense. It's a project structured request. It would be linked up with the project structured template. And we'll go into what does a project template look like in just a moment. I just wanted to show you some of the other reusable process that's automatically baked in and you can manipulate if you want to. You can specify whether or not the project should automatically get created once the approval process is completed. So if I go back here, once it gets all the way to the approve stage and it's done, whether or not a project will automatically get created is manipulated by whether or not there was a checkbox in the template here. So auto create project, in this case, yes. And if I scroll down here, like I said, there's a whole approval process for the requests, and that's reusable. That's going to be dictated by what we have in this level here. So do we want there to be an approval process to go from the draft stage to accepted? In this case, we do. So we put an approver's name in there. And you could have multiple approvers, by the way. You could have additional approval email text. So when Christine gets the request to approve this request that was put in, there could be some additional context that you might want to be in the email that she gets every single time somebody tries to go from the draft stage to accepted. And if I want, I could have additional approvals required to go from accepted to reviewed, for example, or reviewed to approved. So that would be the whole reusable process when it comes to requests. I want to come away from here now and look at projects. When it comes to reusable process for creating a brand new project, now of course a project can be created just by somebody going through the entire request process. A formal request process where they go to request, they click new, and it goes through all those approvals. If somebody has the relevant permissions to do so, they could just skip the request process and create a project immediately by skipping that whole request process and going into the projects module here and clicking on new. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'll give it a name. So demo project A. And here is where, similar to what we did when we were going through the request process, in this place here, project template, we're going to say We want to quickly create a project that's built from a particular template. So I'll click my enter key, and in this case, I'll choose project standard, for example. And you could see some information was quickly filled in automatically. So again, it's all about the whole theme here is quick, right? So not only will a project get created that has all of the process built in, including its own process, approval process to get from one project stage to the next, it also pre-populate with who's the default project manager for this kind of a project, one that's built from project standard, who's the typical or default project sponsor, what portfolio should it be a part of, and what program should it be a part of. So this is a way to get started fast. Now, again, if the person has the right permission, they can come in here and change this, right? Or you might even have multiple versions of the project standard template with different with appropriate naming, so that different people show up here every time, and a different portfolio shows up here every time. And it's very easy to create derivative project templates so that the person doesn't even have to take the time to change the values that are in here. Now, how do those values get in there automatically and for the quick creation? It would be if I go to the project templates. Now I'm back in the templates area. I have a different hat on, right? I'm not a regular user at this point. And let's go look at that project standard project template. So we're going to go behind the scenes here. So you can see here, this is where those values automatically got populated from. The portfolio was automatically populated because of what's going on behind the scenes in that particular project template. We have a program, which would be the one that we saw a moment ago, and then we have the people, right? So if this was good for, let's say, 80% of the projects that are created from a standard type template, or you might have a different name, right? It could be widget A type projects. You could easily rename the template. And for widget A type projects, this is always the project manager. She's always the project sponsor. But now we need a different project template for widget Bs, for example. Well, it'd be very easy to create that derivative template as I've mentioned, and that would be just to click create copy. I'm not going to do it just in the interest of time, but if I were to click on create copy, it would create a duplicate of this project standard template. But then when I go into that copy, I can just very simply change the name. So it would be project widget B, and I can come into that same template, copy, change who's the project manager sponsor, change any of these values here as well. And I could also come in and customize through configuration what the approval process is going to look like. Do I want there to be an approval required whenever somebody comes into this type of a project to get from initiate to plan, for example? So let's get out of here and go back into we'll come out of here and go into an existing project, just so I can show you when I talk about reusable approval process for a project, what does that look like? So let's just come into this project here. So here we are, we're in a project. This project was built from, let's go look at, it was built from a template that was called JW Play, because that's what we're going to do. I'm going to play around with this one a bit. But it's really equivalent to a project structured type of a project. You could see we have, for example, so many different tabs across the top. We have risk management here, issue management, cost management. So that would be part of a more structured type of a template. And I'll show you in a bit how did we make these tabs reusable in a moment. But where I just came from over here was I wanted to talk about the approval process. So the approval process, do we require an approval to get from one stage of the project to the next? And what should the approval process look like? Should it be called initiate, plan, execute, closeout, or should it be called something else? Well, that is going to be managed by what you choose from inside the template, what we choose to show up for the business process flow. So in this case, we're saying we want that business process flow to be the one that we chose for this is your typical standard BrightWork 365 uh, business process flow. And because that's the one that was chosen, that's what's going to show up across the top over here. If I wanted to change that and create again, a copy and maybe I want a different type of business process flow to show across the top, I can do that um, fairly easily. So what I would do is make sure that I'm going into the appropriate template. So now I'm going to go from being a user to being an admin. I'm going to go into that template. And I can change that business process flow to something else. So let's change it to a new product introduction type of a business process flow and save that. So now any project, I'm not, you probably want to think this through before you create all of the projects from the template. You know, you'd probably want to create the template and then have everybody go and create projects from it. But in this case, I'm going to show you how it's changing an existing project. So we changed the business process flow to something else. It's saved. I'm going to go back into that project. And we will see that the business process flow for this project was immediately changed, right? So instead of it being initiate, plan, you know, your typical waterfall type of a project process, execute, closeout, it now has a different flavor to it, right? So we're back in the project. We said that we want the business process flow to be a new product introduction, and you can see that it actually the whole the stages and the approvals that are going to be required have changed along the top here. So I didn't have to do any major customization or configuration. It was very, very quick to do that. Let's go back. I'm going to go back into the template. I want to show you something else that we can change very quickly. It would be the tabs that are going across the top. So we've already changed the business process flow here, but let's now play around with some of the tabs so that when somebody creates a new project from that template, they'll have a particular set of tabs. So we're going to go back into that template, project template play. Again, I'm going to go away from being a regular user into an admin. And I want to introduce you to this other component of a template, reusable process, what we call the form configurator. So we looked at how we could easily change the business process flow. We could change the fields that are showing up. But now let's talk about the different tabs that show up. So I'm going to click on form configurator. And out of the box, this is what we think would be a good starting point for the tabs that should show up for this kind of a project. Pretty much, well, everything is checked. But let's say we want a certain number of projects to be built from a template that's slightly different. We want to be able to reuse a template that does not show, for example, um, risk management. I don't recommend this. I'm a big proponent of risk management, but not everybody is at that level of maturity for project management just yet. So we're going to uncheck uh, risks and we're going to uncheck cost management, for example. We're going to keep everything else that's in here. Before I click save, I want to just go look at what that project looked beforehand. So I'm just going to go back to being an end user. I'm going to go back to that project, JW Play. And you can see at the moment, we have risks showing up, we have cost, right? But we're now going to we're going to change the underlying template to quickly make a change to the actual project management component. So at this point, I am going to click save. Okay. You click save. Let's now refresh this. And you can see risks and costs. have now disappeared from the project. And any new projects that are created from this template over here, this JW Play project template, they're going to come immediately without risks and without costs. And if I change my mind, I could just simply, I'm back in the project template here. I could quickly put checks back in. I'm going to click Save, Risks and Costs. I can go back to the project, refresh, and you can see we have the risk management back in place and cost back in place. So very quick way for you to change the process. The next piece we are set to talk about is reusable content, right? So we talked about reusable process, the business process flow, the approval process, the tabs that show up as part of our process. Let's talk about reusable content. And the reason we'd be doing this is, well, very simply, we want to avoid reinventing the wheel with each new project, right? Maybe we have a project that went so well or went well enough of a certain type, right? So I don't know, maybe it was a widget B type of a project, and we really liked the content that was in it, and we want our colleagues to be able to reuse that content so that A, they can get started quickly, but B, maybe avoid pitfalls, right? Maybe avoid certain mistakes whenever they're managing a widget B type of a project. So let me show you some things about reusable content. Let's get back in here. So we're going to stick with the play project for a moment. And the type of content we're talking about is, for example, the Gantt, right? So the Gantt, I'm sure, as you probably know, it takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears often to get your work breakdown structure just right. Your task definition, even the names of the tasks could take quite a while for the team to all agree on. Other components like the duration of the tasks. So much goes into creating a quote unquote perfect Gantt task list. So let's just say we've figured that out. We cracked that nut. We have a great Gantt um, list, Gantt task chart, and then maybe there's risk management. Hopefully that went in to this project, right? And that's also a thing that could take a lot of effort, a lot of professional discussion, let's say, or arguments. What's a valid risk? How are we going to manage this risk? What are the mitigations and contingency plans for those risks? It's really critical to get that right. But again, not everybody does it perfectly. So imagine we can create that as we can include risks as part of reusable content as well. And there's some other aspects we're going to look at that can be reused. So it's quite simple to work with that reusable content. So we get things set just right. This could be a project that's still in play, that's still in execution. It doesn't have to be a closed project. It could be, but no matter what state the project is in, when you feel that this would be good content to be reused, um, you have that option to make that easier for your colleagues. You would just come into project settings and you would click here. It says copy to new content template. So content template would be the technical term for part of how you create reusable content. We would just have to click yes. Again, in the interest of time, I won't do it, but I would just click yes. It would go about its business creating what we call a content template. Let's take a look now at what a fully baked content template would look like. So I'm going to click back into projects. And in projects, I'm just going to drop the arrow down and we're going to click on content templates. And this will show us like a menu of all these various content templates for reusable content that have been created along the way. And you can see there's quite a bit. So we could just click on any one of them. But in the real world, you'd be giving this content templates a specific name so that it's easy for somebody to know that, yes, this is a bunch of content that I would like to reuse in my brand new project. So I'm just going to click on this one randomly. The The end user would not actually come in here, what I just clicked into, to actually manage the project. It's just kind of showing you the ingredients that would be part of a project that eventually gets created where it made use of this content template, if that makes sense. So it might be a little bit of a lot of words that you kind of have to, I might have to repeat again to make it make sense even to myself. So I'm going to say it one more time. You don't actually click into the content template to manage the project. It's just showing you that this is something that could be through a very simple process, can be part of a brand new project that I'm going to eventually create. So you could see the reusable content includes, in this case, includes these stages that have been pre-built. Let's see the Gantt chart information. It's got all those wonderful, beautiful Gantt tasks all laid out in just the right manner with a particular duration. We have issues. Now, you may not, some people might find value in reusing particular issues. Some may not, but the option is there for you if you want to. I think risks is something that would certainly be of value to reuse in a brand new project that's created with this content template included in it. So here's one risk. Hopefully you'll have a bunch more, and there's even some project settings that can be included as part of that content template. So that's the main points about the reusable content. So it's quite a bit that can be reused. And again, there's a simple process to make this part of brand new projects that get created. I'm just going to move on now. Let's just look at our agenda to the last part here before we get to Q&A, which would be global settings. So in addition to all the process that could be reused, in addition to all the content that we just went over that would make life easier for other project managers and team members, there's also some settings that you may want to not make people really think about too hard when they're doing their project management, just stuff that's already been set up for them. So global settings make it easy to apply what I would say critical or essential settings across the entire portfolio. So let's look at those reusable settings right now. If I take the hat off of an end user and I go into what we call the admin area here, we're going to focus on global settings and non-working days. So global settings, again, as the name implies, would be something that other people don't have to think about. These are just going to be slapped onto every new project that you create. So let's click into it. So that would be what you see here. What is the working week for the entire organization by default? What is the working week? It's usually, it's often going to be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but you might be in a part of the world where that's not what it is. So you could just easily come in here and knock off a day, add a Saturday or a Sunday to it, and that becomes your reusable global setting for working week, and that is going to have the effects that you would expect it to have, like in the Gantt chart, for example. So when you're going and you're setting a start, you're saying in a project, a start date is such and such, and it's going to last for 2 weeks. The Gantt chart is going to be smart enough to know not to include the days that are not part of the default working week. So that's global settings. It's essentially working week. In future upgrades or iterations of our product, it'll probably have some other settings in it. But for now, it's the working week. The other thing that can be applied across the board easily for quick project management is what we call non-working days. Think of non-working days as holidays, right? So you might have a global setting of Monday through Friday, but of course, there's going to be specific Mondays and specific Tuesdays and Fridays, etc., where there's globally in our organization no work being done. We can very easily click on new and create new non-working days. And those again will have the effect on a Gantt chart, for example, and work assignments that you would expect them to have. So that's, create a new project. These are automatically applied. You don't have to think twice about it. You might be asking, okay, but what about exceptions? What if I'm a project manager managing project widget C? I think we're up to letter C here. For this particular project, we're not going to we can't follow these reusable settings that were put in there. It's not a problem. We can come into a project. We can go into this guy here, for example. And we can, by we, I mean project managers, those who have the appropriate permissions, can come into this. So we're in an individual project now, like we're all zoomed in to a specific project, and we can click on schedule settings. So let's click that guy. And we're saying, you know what, for this particular project, we need to override those global settings. Our working week is not going to be Monday through Friday. It's going to be something different. And I can easily change that for this particular project here. And for project exception days, this would be adding additional holidays, for example, or saying either we're going to be working on a particular day that maybe was excluded as a holiday generally. So that would be work. I'm setting a particular working day. This doesn't override the working week, Monday through Friday. It would override holidays that would be globally applicable, but not applicable to this project. Or maybe I'm saying, even though there was a holiday set for this particular day, um, we have globally, we have additional non-working days. There are specific holidays that this project has to respect. So we can easily set that up over there as well. So there you have it, right? There's reusable pieces, reusable components, and there are even ways for you to override those if you need to at the project level. Going back to my agenda here, I see it's time for Q&A, and I am going to hand the mic back over to Mihal.
Thanks very much, Jonathan. That was great. Um, yeah, I found that really interesting, and I guess that repeatable processes are the key to repeatable success. Um, so I'm just going to run a little poll while we get back into what we're talking about. So basically, folks, we asked you at the start, were you using Microsoft 365 for your project management? And I guess what I'm interested in seeing is, would you now consider using BrightWork 365 in your Microsoft 365 environment? So yes, definitely, you might have some questions. And speaking of questions, we do have time for a couple of questions if you do want to ask a few. So please do add them into the questions panel there and go to webinar. So people are saying that yes, and they have some questions, which is absolutely fine, or that they'd like to see more first. So while you're filling that out, guys, let me just drop this into the chat for you. Bear with me. So folks, if you do want to ask questions here, you're more than welcome. But if you do want to book a custom demo, I'm just going to drop a link into the poll. So folks, thank you very much for completing that poll. If you do want a custom demo, please do reach out to our colleague, Adam. So you will hear from him tomorrow. He is going to send out an email to you with the recording, but you can also reach him on this link that I just dropped in the chat. So you can book a short 10-minute talk with him where you can outline what you'd be looking for in a custom demonstration, and he can help you out then by putting you in touch with one of our experts. Okay, so let's have a look at the quick look at the questions. Tony wants to know if the request numbering sequence can be aligned with, say, a Jira issue number. It would be great if the request was the same as the Jira issue. So that's an integrations question, I guess.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, great question. There is not Jira integration at the moment. So yeah, it would have to be sort of something that you might speak with your customer success partner to see if it's feasible. For, we do certain types of customizations for
Yeah.
for our customers. I mean, it's quite often, but that particular one, it would have that would have to be sort of researched. But there's no built-in integration with Jira at the moment.
You do bring up the good point, though, that you will be working with the customer success partner your whole journey through, and you will be supported and helped on your BrightWork 365 journey. And there is opportunities to develop, and the word we use in BrightWork is to evolve your processes using the tool.
Exactly.
Uh, Richard wants to know if there's a way to test and validate the product in a sandbox. Uh, I guess, Richard, unless you've anything else to add, Jonathan, that probably is a better question for Adam and our sales team after that, I guess.
Yeah,
But
correct. Yeah, yeah. They can speak
naturally,
to you
he's look.
about yeah, I need the trial if there's a trial process, etc.
Yeah, naturally, he wants to see more of it and try it out before he gets approval for the purchase. So that's absolutely natural. That's something that we can talk about for sure,
Yeah,
Richard.
excellent.
Um, do you know what? The rest of the questions I have right now, Norm wants to know about costs, Ailish wants to know about costs, and Cheng Li is looking for information on licensing. Does every user need to buy a license to use this app? So I guess we could bundle a lot of those questions together, Jonathan, maybe.
Yeah, just before I wanted to just go back to the Jira question. So although it's not an integration automatic type of a situation, I'm sharing my screen here. There is,
Hmm.
as part of the template that we've been looking at behind the scenes, there is the option to either have like reference numbering to be automatic, or if it's something that you needed to manually put in some sort of reference number. So it's not the automatic thing that you may have been thinking about, but you're not necessarily tied to an automatic referencing system. The most recent question, Mihal, was it about pricing and
So I guess there was a couple of questions there about pricing, and I guess the place to look is on our website on the pricing page, which I see
yeah,
you're showing now, but I'm also going to find it and drop a link into the chat as well, so people can go straight to it.
correct. Yeah, great. And on this page, besides pricing, if you scroll all the way down, you'll see there's an FAQ section here which talks more about pricing. I'm sure there's going to be questions about licensing, and there's the BrightWork licensing, and then there's the Microsoft 365 licensing. So that is detailed a bit in the FAQ at the bottom of the pricing page.
That's great, and I'm glad you showed that workaround for the requests question, because nothing about the product is set in stone, and we've got some very smart people working for us. So there are workarounds for plenty of questions that people have. Um, so
Yes.
I'm glad.
Yeah, it's a big part of the process with the customer success partner that you would be assigned. There's a whole requirements gathering component to it, conversations with customizers in our organization. You're welcome to customize if it's something that's within your skill set. So yeah, plenty of discussion around tweaking and altering the product if you need to.
Cool. Well, folks, we said we'd keep you for 45 minutes, and we're here a little bit over, but we appreciate you staying on the line with us. Um, as I said, if we have any more questions, we might take them offline, and we might reach out to you guys if that's okay, if you have questions already. Otherwise, you're free to contact us as well. Jonathan, you might just flash up that last slide again, just as we finish up.
There you go.
Um, Perfect. So Adam is the next logical step. If you do have questions about BrightWork 365, um, that's great. Otherwise, I hope you found something useful in this presentation, and we really thank you for joining us today. And thank you, Jonathan, for going through that demonstration. That was great.
No, you're very welcome, and thanks everybody for joining.
Hopefully, we'll be chatting to you soon, and have a great day wherever you are. Talk to you soon.
Goodbye.